today. He joined Toastmasters in May and won the humorous speech contest for the club area in October. Today he will be giving a speech on a more serious topic about the life of Henry Ford. So please give a warm welcome to Greg Geikema.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. My fellow Toastmates and our guest Mary, welcome. Whether you believe you can do something or whether you believe you cannot do something, you're right. That's a quote from Henry Ford. Henry was born in 1863 in Dearborn, Michigan. His mother passed away when he was only 13 years old. It was very tough on Henry, as his father had Henry working on the farm from dawn to dusk during his early years. As his father always put it, however, Henry wasn't much of a farmer, he was more of a tinkerer. Henry was obsessed with watches. He would take them apart, put them together, he became an expert watch repairman. He wasn't your typical teenager either, in that he had a shed out back where he would put together steam engines. His original idea was to create a steam tractor, or a gasoline tractor, that would help with the farm chores he hated so much. Henry was a staunch believer in efficiency. He once grew tired of trying to open and get off the horse carriage to open and close this heavy gate, so he devised some hinges and a contraption where he never had to get off the wagon and just open and close it. It was a sign of things to come. So it was no surprise that Henry Ford went to work in the machine shops in Detroit at age 16. For 3 years he labored. The pay was low, but he devoured all the knowledge that he received during these years. At age 19, he came back to work on his father's farm, and for much of the next decade, he worked there. During the day, he would work on the crops, and all his spare time he spent out in that shed working, trying to create a gasoline engine. Now, Henry realized at age 28 that he was going to need more electrical knowledge to complete his engine. And he got a big break when he went to Detroit and got a job with Edison Illuminating. It was a company founded by Thomas Edison. It was Henry's boyhood hero. He had just invented electricity not long before that. So Henry was glad to work for Edison. He was a genius. He worked his way up quickly through the company, got more time to work on his car. And by 1896, Henry had his first prototype here. Basically, it was called a quadricycle. Basically a bicycle with a seat to ride, a big bicycle. But it got up to speeds of about 20 miles an hour, so it was pretty advanced for its time. 2 months after Henry invented the quadricycle, he had an epiphany. He went to a professional convention in New York City, and Thomas Edison was there. Somehow Henry wrangled a ticket to get into the banquet, and he got up to Edison's table. Someone mentioned Henry had just invented this gas engine, so Edison was naturally interested. And they spoke over it. Edison wanted to know how the electrical spark would explode the gasoline, and Henry told him, and Edison slammed his fist down. That's it, you've got it. Because before then, everyone talked to Henry said, well, the electricity is the future. Cars are going to be electric, but Edison knew that an electric car, you would need to have power sources near the car to charge it. But this gasoline engine was self-contained. So that really inspired Henry. He'd been working on this for 15, 20 years. And sometimes he believed and sometimes he didn't believe. But when this inventing genius, his hero, told him he could do it, he was more inspired than ever. Well, Henry spent 2 years perfecting the car for his second car, and he actually had 2 companies who invested with him, and both companies went out of business. And the problem was that Henry wanted a car for the masses, and the investors in the company wanted him to get out these expensive cars, because as you think today, well, you couldn't get an airplane out to every American, and that's the way the investors thought. They're just for the wealthy. So it wasn't until 1903, and almost the age of 40, that Henry started the Ford Motor Company, his third company. And he worked for the next 5 years or so. He sold a few cars every now and then. He didn't make a lot of money, but he kept in business. 2/3 of the automobiles at that time were expensive for the wealthy. So he was still trying to get that cost down. He wanted to get it down to $500 a car, because that's the cost that a horse and buggy and the feed for the horses would cost. People thought he was crazy, but he kept at it. He perfected his assembly line by 1908, and in 1909, the Model T car rolled off for the first time. These are just astounding numbers here of the increase in units because of his efficiency rates. Went from 82,000 to 2 million cars, and the price kept dropping. It was about $850 in 1909, and went down to $250 by mid-20s, which is about $5,000 in today's numbers. Now, before the assembly line, cars would take 12 hours to build, which is what most companies were doing. Highland Park and the Model T assembly line had gotten down to 90 minutes. Then in 1914, Henry shocked the world by announcing he would pay $5 a day for a wage, double the going industry rate. Henry argued this would lower the turnover, his workers could afford the cars, and would bring the best workers. And he was right. Now, the modified assembly line, which Henry is most remembered for, probably helped win World War I, because now in his plants they built airplanes, ships. As one observer put it, we could build ships faster than the Germans could sink them. In his 50s, Ford started going on camping trips with 3 other geniuses. He went with Edison, Henry Firestone, and John Burroughs. There's several stories of them going throughout the wilderness, meeting common folk. One time there was a non-Ford car that was broken down in a farm, and Henry went in and fixed it, and the farmer said, "I'd like to give you $1.50 for your help." Ford said, "That's okay, I don't need it." And he went out to his Model T Ford to drive away. The farmer said, "You can't be that rich, you're driving a Ford." So Henry Ford was no superhero, but he was human just like you and me. But he had a belief he could do something, he took action, and he got results from those actions. So that's what I would call you all to do, is get a belief, take action, get results. Thank you.